Step one, you say you need to talk. He walks, you say sit down, it's just a talk. He smiles politely back at you. You step politely.
I almost say Christine Duncan from Faces and Voices of Recovery. She's from Scottish Families Affected by Drugs. I'm really looking forward to that as well. But let me first of all introduce you to Dawn Glancy. Dawn's the founder of Growing Up Chaotic, a community for families and friends of addicts and survivors of domestic violence. She says, I will never forget the night that my drunk stepfather landed a fierce right hook on my mother's mouth. He boasted both her lips wide open. As she fell to the ground, she grabbed my comforter and held it to her face. Days later, she did her best to scrub the blood out of my sheets, but there was one stubborn spot that refused to leave. It's incredible how one night, 5 innocent minutes, can be the hardest to forget. I've spent the majority of my life depressed, anxious, suicidal, angry, enraged, alone, ashamed, terrorised and confused. I've worked my ass off to create a different form from the one I was born into. Alcohol and other drug addiction destroyed my family. I refuse to let it get its hands on me. I want to reach out to other survivors of chaos, abuse and dysfunction, so I created Growing Up Chaotic. Please welcome Dawn Glancy.
Thank you. You have another American here. Today I've been talking to people walking and everybody looks at me and they say, you're not from here, are you? You have an accent. And I'm like, no, you have the accent. I'm not the one with the accent. But I just want to say thank you to Anne-Marie for this opportunity. This is just wonderful to be here and in this space, which is just amazing. I feel like I'm a queen or something, I'm not, but anyway. So today I'm here to talk with you about possibility, but unlike most discussions about possibility, I'm not here to talk about the future. I'm here to talk about the past. Whether you are someone in recovery from a drug addiction, maybe you're a sober alcoholic, maybe you're a family member or a friend of someone that struggles with addiction, or maybe you were just born into a family that's rife with addiction. Today, I am going to show you that not only does your past contain seeds of possibility, but that it can become your greatest asset if you're willing to see it that way. I was just 6 years old when my mom, in a drunken fit of rage, picked me up off the floor and hurled me over the chipped window pane of our window in our living room. And I still remember when she did it, I had on my favorite outfit as a little girl was red corduroy pants and Care Bear t-shirt. I don't know if you had Care Bear here in the UK. You did? Okay, so you know what I'm talking about. Care Bear t-shirt, and I had these pink socks on, trimmed in pink lace. And in a chaotic instant, I was dangling parallel to the bricks on the front of the third-story apartment building. I think I have slides. I have a picture of a building, it's 3 stories. I was dangling parallel to the 3-story apartment building. My mother held me by my ankles, and I wish that I could say that this was the last time that I remember my mom being incredibly drunk and violent with me, but unfortunately I can't. This was just the first incident of many to follow. There you go. Is the next, yeah, it was kind of like that. After my parents got divorced and my mom ended up meeting and eventually marrying the man who became my stepfather, and his name was Joe. Can you do the next slide? On paper, Joe was amazing. He had an incredible work ethic. He was disciplined, he was smart with his money, he paid bills on time, always, and he paid for everything in cash, including the house that he bought for my mother and my Catholic school education. But behind closed doors, when nobody else was around, behind the 4 walls of the house that he bought for my mom, when they got married, Joe was a completely different person. He was a monster. He was a complete nightmare. Not only was Joe a nightmare, but he was also an alcoholic, just like my mom, and this was their drink of choice, Budweiser. I still have a hard time looking at a can of Budweiser because we always had plenty of it in our refrigerator. But that was their drink of choice. So not only was he an alcoholic, but he was an abusive alcoholic, extremely abusive. And when Joe would get drunk, he would beat on my mom, and then my mom would get drunk, and then she would beat on me. I like to joke and say that the two of them together were a match made in heaven. They were like perfect for each other, but of course I'm being completely sarcastic. They were totally wrong for each other, but I can joke now because I'm decades beyond these situations. But through the chaos of addiction, I watched for years as a little girl watching Joe. I have very vivid memories of him bashing her head into mirrors, and I have lots of memories of him choking her until her face turned purple and blue. While most girls my age were dreaming about meeting Cinderella or Snow White, I remember very vividly having nightmares about Joe killing my mom or my mom killing Joe, although I probably would have been happy if she did that, but you know, living in that environment, and I also feared that one of them would kill me. And I have to tell you that if you thought that my mom hanging me out of the third-story window was horrible, that was nothing compared to what happened through the years as her addiction to alcohol progressed. The more that my mom drank, the more violent she became with me. I have vivid memories of her chasing me around the house with kitchen knives. She used to pull chunks of my hair out of my head, so she would grab me and literally wrap my hair around her fist. My hair's not long enough to do it. I used to have really long hair as a little girl, and just pull. Sometimes she would pull my ear as well. She would kick me, she would hurl beer cans at me that weren't open yet, and she lashed out at me verbally, of course. When she was drunk, when my mom would get drunk, I turned into a stupid, spoiled little bitch. I was a burden, nobody wanted me, and she used to tell me all the time that I was supposed to be an abortion, and I didn't even know what an abortion was. I just knew it was probably something bad because of the way she said it to me when she was drunk. But even as a little kid, I knew the difference between physical abuse and verbal abuse. I knew the difference of them very clearly, and I have to say that if I could have traded in more of the physical for less of the verbal, I would have done that, because the verbal just did so much more damage than anything she could have ever done to me physically. And even today, I mean, I'm not that tall, but I'll fight anybody. I'm like, go ahead, punch me. I've already been punched my whole life. Like, this isn't gonna matter, but if somebody, calls me a name, that kind of hurts. But it wasn't until I was 8 years old, after one of the most explosive fights that my mom and Joe had ever had, that I was finally moved out of their house and away from the two of them. But I'll never be able to shake from my memory the fight that they had that night. In fact, I still remember the song that was playing. I don't know if it was big here in the UK. Back in the 80s, there was a song by Matthew Wilder called Break My Stride, and it was blasting out of the speakers on top of the refrigerator that we had in the kitchen. And I have to tell you something, to this day, I can't listen to that song. I just, so if I'm around other people and the song comes on, I try to play it cool, like, there's nothing wrong, but eventually I'm like, oh, let's listen to something else, or I have to go to the bathroom. I still can't listen to it. The next slide. Okay, so on the night that they had this incredible fight, my mom and Joe were really drunk, and my mom kept stumbling into the kitchen to crank the volume up on the stereo, which was something she did when she was drunk. It's like everything had to be louder. And Joe would get really pissed off at her, and he kept telling her, stop doing that, stop doing that. She didn't listen. So before I knew it, Joe had grabbed my mom by the back of the head and dragged her up the stairs to my bedroom like she was a disobedient dog. When he got into my bedroom with her, he threw her down with such force that the side of her face cracked into the metal frame, I don't know, what do you call that? Metal frame around my bed. And I'll never be able to forget that sound of her face hitting that metal. It was like just, it was a horrible sound. So my mom's there on the floor, and she's trying to get up to defend herself, and she gets up on her knees, and Joe cranks back his fist, and he swings the meanest right hook I've ever seen in my life into her side of her face. He dislodges her jaw, and he busts her face wide open. She's bleeding everywhere. And on my bed, she's still against my bed. On my bed, I had this comforter that was white, and it had these really pretty little purple, pink, and blue flowers all over it. And my mom started pulling it off the bed and held it to her face to catch all the blood. And that's in the intro. Anne-Marie talked about that, how there was like blood all over my comforter. My mom washed it, but there was just one spot of blood that never came out. So it was like always a reminder. But anyway, I rushed into the room and I tried to help my mom. Like I always did, trying to save her. And Joe cut me off and he started to push me back into a corner of my bedroom. And Joe, I was really little, so this monster's coming down on me, and he pulled his fist back and he's pushing me into this corner of my bedroom. And I don't remember anything after that point. I don't remember what happened. My memory just went blank, which is not uncommon when you experience trauma. Your body or your mind, whatever it is, it just has this ability to just cut those memories out. You don't remember. I don't remember. Everything went blank. But what I do remember is that the next day, why it finally clicked with my mom, I don't know, but she decided enough was enough, and she called my father, and within a couple hours, he pulled up outside my mom's house, and I piled into his car, his truck, and we drove off, and I never went back. The next slide. So physically, I was finally out of harm's way, but my recovery was still a long way off. After moving away from Mom and Joe, I suffered with post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, but I had no idea what it was. Back in the 80s, nobody talked about post-traumatic stress disorder. I was afraid to go to bed at night because I relived all of the trauma through my dreams. So I literally would fight my dad, like, I don't want to go to bed. It's like everything that my mind had blocked out came to life in my dreams. In school, my teachers labeled me as retarded, and I don't use that word to be insensitive, but that's what they called me. And they placed me in special education classes. And at the time, I had a major learning disability. I was years behind all the other kids in my class because, unlike my peers, I lived at home with 2 alcoholic parents, and I wasn't worried about learning multiplication tables or learning how to use a ruler or write a book report. I was worried about survival, that's it. And I think that's another issue, just as an aside, even in our schools, that we have to start talking about, is that if you have a child in your school that's not doing well or has behavior problems, you gotta look at what's going on at home. I mean, my teachers literally called me retarded, but I wasn't. I just was so focused on just not being killed. Then to move on, as a teenager, I got sucked into this paralyzing spiral of depression, which also I didn't recognize, and nobody talked about depression when I was in high school. My mind was soaked with thoughts of self-hatred, something else I've heard a lot of other people today talk about. I couldn't even tolerate my own reflection in the mirror, and I've heard a lot of other people say that as well today. I didn't have low self-worth, I had no self-worth. And as an adult, I've also heard several of the other speakers today talk about being broken. Broken isn't even the word for what I was. I don't mashed up. I don't know what you could call it, but I continue to underperform as an adult, to doubt myself, to hate myself. I was so depressed at one point, and then at other points I'd be so anxious that I couldn't even leave my apartment. I was afraid of people. I was afraid of the world. And my life got so messy at one point that not only did I begin to contemplate suicide, I actually attempted to take my own life. And somebody else today talked about, I think it was you, talked about that scary place of you just don't care anymore. I mean, I would literally stand on the corner, see a truck coming down the street and say, oh, I could walk in front of that truck. Would it really matter? But on the attempt that I actually made, my dad had a gun in his closet and I knew he had it there. So I went to his house and he left, and I went into the closet and the gun was on the shelf where he kept his shoes, and I reached up for the gun and I had it in my hand, and then I reached up for the bullets and I'm like feeling around and they were gone. They were completely gone. I don't know if my dad got rid of them or what, but they weren't there. Now I can stand up here today and talk about all this crazy stuff because I've done a lot of work on myself. Over the years, I've spent lots of time and lots of money on therapy. I've read nearly every self-help book that I could ever get my hands on. I've attended countless Al-Anon meetings and AA meetings so that I could try to understand, what was going on with my parents. I've practiced yoga, I've practiced meditation, I've joined depression support groups, I've leaned on suicide hotlines. I did that for many years because, the feeling kind of just doesn't go away, it just gets less intense. And I also paid for and signed up for self-development courses, anything that I could find. I did the hard work because I knew that I had to, because my life depended on it. Otherwise, I was doomed to repeat the same mistakes. Either that or I was going to kill myself. And slowly, very slowly at times, I made really great progress and I started to feel better. Somebody else was talking about, suddenly the world seems beautiful, and I know that feeling. I really started to feel better. But it's interesting because I think it was Dr. Al that said, recovery never gets boring. So if you're getting bored, don't worry about it, because there's going to be something coming up that, will be new for you. And I agree with that 100%, because even though I was starting to feel better, I still felt like there was something holding me back and I just couldn't put my finger on what it was. Do the next slide. So if you picture this massive mountain, and at the base of this mountain I'm standing there, and there's all this crap, mud, muck all around me, and I'm knee deep in it, and it's so tight that I can barely wiggle my toes. And I'm looking up at the top of this mountain, and as they say here in the UK, it looks brilliant, and that's where I want to be, that's where I want to go. So I start to wiggle myself out of this muck. I get my right leg out, my left leg out. I find a ledge on the side of the mountain, and I'm pulling myself up, and I'm out, and I'm making my way up, and I'm making progress, and it's hard, but I'm doing it. I get to the midpoint of this mountain, and I stop to take a breather, maybe celebrate a little bit, I'm not feeling suicidal anymore, I'm not as depressed as I once was, and I gather myself, and I'm ready to continue, but I can't move. I don't know what I need to do to keep moving forward. And it's as if somebody took a boulder that was like twice the size of my head, wrapped it around my waist, and was like, let's see you try to move now. Just grabbing, and just nothing's happening. So from what I've heard here today, a lot of people felt that way before in their life, just stuck. And next to feeling suicidal and feeling like you just don't care anymore, I have to say that that's probably the next worst feeling, is feeling stuck. Whether it's in your recovery, wanting to move forward, whatever, not knowing what to do next. It's quite frustrating. Well, that's exactly where I was not too long ago. I was stuck. I was really stuck. But I knew I needed to try to keep moving forward. So to find my answers, I started digging. I get really excited, when it comes to figuring stuff out. So I'm digging around, and by some lucky twist of fate or some quirk in the universe, I found an answer that I was looking for through a woman by the name of Joy Harjo. I have a picture of her. Now, on paper, Joy Harjo is a musician, she's an author, she's a poet, she's a performer based in the United States. But I like to think of her as one of us. She was raised in a dysfunctional family. Her father was an alcoholic, her stepfather was violent, and she became a mom during her teenage years. So she's no stranger to trauma and all that stuff that comes along with dysfunction. So while I was trolling around on the internet one day, I found this interview that she did, and I just, for some reason, started to read it. And in the interview, she was talking about how trauma in her early years was blocking her creative growth. And this is what she had to say. Sometimes I think in order to get something that we really want, or we really love, or something that needs to be realized, that we're tested. I think if you look at any stories all over the world, they are usually set up as, okay, here's where I start, here's where I want to go, and here are the tests. And she continues, and they were pretty intense tests. I failed a lot of them, or I found a way around them. And maybe there's no such thing as failure. And the next part is what I really wanted to read to you. She continues, at least I've had to come to that in my life to realize that this stuff called failure, this stuff this debris of historical trauma, family trauma, the stuff that can kill your spirit, is actually raw material to make things with and to build a bridge. You can use those materials to build a bridge over that which would destroy you. And I read that and I like nearly fell over. I was like, this is what I was looking for. This is the answer, the perspective, the aha moment, the spiritual awakening, whatever you want to call it. This was it. Because I realized at that moment that up until that point, I had been running off the steam of all of the discoveries that I had made in therapy, all the wisdom I gathered from self-help books and Al-Anon meetings, but the steam had run out. Now it was time for me to go back into what Joy Harjo refers to as the debris of my trauma, my family trauma, the stuff that nearly killed my spirit, and go back into all that crap and that muck and find those experiences and use them to build a bridge over that which nearly destroyed me. It was time for me to build a bridge to the top, it's not there anymore, to the top of the mountain or to the top of her head. It was time for me to step up and turn my past into my greatest asset. It was time for me to recognize and discover the things that I'd never be able to pull off the page of a self-help book, or I'd ever be able to purchase, or even walk out of an Al-Anon meeting with. And the reason for that is because I already had it in me. My past and all that I had earned through the trauma that I walked through was all that I needed to get unstuck. All that I had to do was start picking through this debris, and that's exactly what I did, and here's what I found. Although my childhood was full of abuse and chaos, I discovered that it was precisely those experiences that made me incredibly resilient and durable. And although my parents were often too drunk or too consumed with their own problems to take care of me, I discovered that their negligence actually made me fiercely independent and wise beyond my years. And sure, I envied other kids my age that seemed to have perfect parents and normal family, which I know normal doesn't exist. But when you're a kid growing up with alcoholic parents, you have an idea of what normal is in your head, even if it's not accurate. But while their every need was being met, I was learning how to take care of myself. I was learning the basics of survival. And when my stepfather pulled out his gun and shoved it in my face, or my mom chased me around the house with knives, of course those moments were extremely traumatic, but I discovered that it was precisely in those moments that I learned how to be resourceful. Because you better believe, as a 5-year-old, I knew how to move fast, and I knew how to move on my feet quickly. Quickly. I learned how to come up with quick solutions in my mind to get out of harm's way. I had to be, otherwise I wouldn't be standing up here with you today. So that's all well and good, but if you're still not convinced that it's possible for you to go back into your past and to pull out the good stuff or the advantages, turn your past into your greatest asset, there's one more person that I want to introduce you to, and his name is Jesse Shankaran. Next one. Oh, the next one. Okay, there he is. So a couple of months ago, I had the opportunity to interview Jesse on my podcast. He's a chef living in New York City, and he had just released his recovery/culinary memoir, All or Nothing, One Chef's Appetite for the Extreme, which, by the way, I highly recommend. It's an easy read, quick, and it's a really great story. But if you met Jesse today, at least when I met him over the phone, I was completely intimidated and blown away by all that he's managed to accomplish in the culinary world. Just to give you an idea, he's the executive chef and owner of 2 restaurants in the West Village of New York City, and if you're not familiar with New York City, the West Village is posh. There you go. He's a James Beard Rising Star semi-finalist. He's been recognized by Zagat's as one of the 30 hottest chefs under 30, as well as in Forbes magazine's 30 under 30. He's been named one of the best new chefs in New York Magazine. He's received 2-star reviews in both the New York Magazine and New York Times, and on and on and on. But what you don't know about Jesse, and what you would probably not be able to tell from this picture, is that before he became a culinary success, he was a full-blown addict. During his days as an active addict, Jesse was so taken by heroin that when he didn't have access to fresh water, he would dissolve his heroin in public toilet water or dirty puddle water in order to shoot up. And this is the same exact Jesse that today owns 2 restaurants in one of the poshest neighborhoods in New York City. And this is the same exact Jesse that for years, while immersed in addiction, he lived in bushes, he slept in cardboard boxes, he overdosed, he called on prostitutes, and he dodged bullets. It's the same exact guy, and you probably wouldn't be able to tell that if just looking at, he looks like a chef, right? That's it. But what impresses me the most about Jesse today actually goes beyond the fact that he's even clean and sober, or that he owns 2 successful restaurants, or that he's married and then he has 2 kids. I'm more blown away by how Jesse, as someone in recovery, has been able to turn his past into his greatest asset. In addition to living on the streets, Jesse also did time in jail, and in his memoir, he talks about how jail was one of the most humiliating and dehumanizing experiences of his life. And he also talked about how he had to learn how to survive, right? So he's living on the streets, he's got to learn how to survive. Now he's in jail, he's got to learn how to survive. And he had to be really quick and learn what he called the strange and unwritten rules of jail, because if he didn't, he would be in big trouble. So just to give you an example, I thought some of these were actually really funny. I've never been to jail. I have people in my family that have, but it's just, if it's not yours, don't touch it. It's none of your business, don't go near it. To always spit in the toilet instead of the sink. To get up and walk around the table if you need something instead of reaching over another inmate. And most importantly, to never change the channel on the TV. And that sounds a lot like my husband. Don't change a channel on the TV. But he's not like that. And of course, he goes on to say that if you broke any of these rules in jails, you were toast. You were in trouble. But after he did his time in jail and he was released, he was clean and sober for a while, and he really started to pursue his culinary career, his culinary dreams. And after a lot of hard work, he ended up landing an opportunity to work for this guy, which I hope you'll recognize him. None other than Gordon Ramsay, right? The man who's made a career out of yelling at people on TV. So he lands a gig with this guy. And I've never watched his show. In America, he's a show called Hell's Kitchen. I've never watched that show, but I know this guy's reputation. I mean, I don't know. His reputation is, probably bigger than this building. But Jesse was well aware of his reputation as well, and he knew what he was signing up for. And instead of backing away from it, instead of saying, oh, but I was a homeless addict, and I overdosed, and I'm not going to have the same level of culinary training, professional culinary training, that the other guys in the kitchen are going to have. Because he knew, and if you think about it, it makes sense. He knew that if he could survive on the streets, he knew that if he could survive jail, what could Gordon Ramsay possibly say or do to him that would matter, And he knew that he had that advantage over the other guys in the kitchen that, were busy going to culinary school, which is, I'm not, that's great. I'm not, trying to bash that. But he knew that he also had that advantage over them as well. He went back into his past and he turned it into these experiences into assets. Just as Joy Harjo had said, he knew that the experiences that nearly killed his spirit contained the raw materials that he needed to excel in sobriety and in his career and his life. And he grabbed onto them and excelled. Can you do the next one? Okay. So before I wrap up here today, I just want to make one last point about returning to your past, because I have a tendency that when I start thinking about my past, I like to start throwing myself a pity party, and it's very easy to go back there and do that. But going back into those moments that are, the most traumatic or painful, it's not about getting stuck there. It's not about going back there and reassigning blame or beating yourself up for really bad decisions you made. That's not what this is about. What I really think that this is about is giving yourself credit for surviving, giving yourself credit for whatever you've been through. Whether someone like me who grew up in this crazy family, dodging bullets, guns, knives, fists, all that. Maybe you're someone in recovery that's lived on the streets, done time in jail. Just take a second and give yourself some credit for surviving. No matter what anybody else says or thinks of you, you survived. Give yourself some credit. And then I think after that, the next thing that you have to do is just decide, you're going to ask yourself this question: are you going to continue to see your past as being full of disadvantages, or are you going to look at it and think, I want to try to find something in here, an asset, something that I can use in this world that not in this world, but the average person wouldn't have access to. I always like to joke and say, you can't even learn what I learned at home at Harvard. You can't. No, you can't be taught this. All these experiences, I think there was a speaker earlier who said the greatest asset he has today are his experiences. So why not just make them work for you? You don't need anybody's permission to do that. I started doing it, and nobody gave me permission. Well, you can too. So, yes, okay. So even if you were abused as a kid, you're in recovery. I think we've covered all the bases here. There's really no excuses. I always say, people come up to me and they tell me their stories, and I'm like, there's nothing you could throw at me that would surprise me. So I take no excuses. But what I am trying to tell you today is that your past can become your greatest asset if you're willing to see it that way. And maybe my story, if it didn't convince you, then maybe what Joy Harjo said in her interview did, or maybe Jesse Shanker's story did. Hopefully something inspired you. Because there's possibility, there's gold there waiting for you to discover, and hopefully today I've inspired you to start looking. Thanks for listening.
Thanks very much, Dawn. You touched on so much.